presentation today is about climate frames, but I thought I would introduce myself first. And I know I don't look a lot like Tarzan. I wasn't raised by apes or wolves, but I did have a couple things in common with Tarzan. I lost my parents at a fairly early age. They were just unavailable in my life. And I also grew up in a jungle. The jungle was in Minnesota. And I was a feral kid, but luckily I had a lake and a stream and a swamp, forest right next to where I slept. And a lot of times I slept out there. And even as a kid, without any adults to give me context, I learned a couple of things. I learned first that everything is connected. We are all connected. The other thing was, as a kid, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what I was going to be when I grew up. I think everybody kind of goes through that. I wanted to be a forest ranger. I really liked those hats. And I thought that it would be cool to lead a team of pack horses up into the mountains to catch poachers and that sort of thing. At the same time, I had my mother's book of English verse. So I would read that, and I'd read Wordsworth or Shelley and that sort of thing. And I became interested in words, and I'm fascinated by words. Words to me are like water flowing over rocks. And so I thought I would be a forest ranger poet. And when I looked for this image, I searched forest ranger poet, and it's a wide open field, I'll tell you what. But as you grow up, things change. And to honor my father, I went into chemical engineering and physics of all things. And I've been a business person, and you get a family and things happen. Well, I've always been this kind of person that thought that I could buy an absolution on climate from the Sierra Club. If you just make enough contributions, you can get into Sierra Club heaven or whatever that is. Well, I had an event happen to me about a year ago, and I will tell you about that at the end of this little story. But I wanted to go around the room real quick and just pick a couple people. What did you want to be when you grew up? Marty?
First I wanted to be a fireman, then a physics major, and eventually got to psychology.
Okay, all right. Anybody else, Ed?
I wanted actually to be a physicist from a young age, or a microbiologist.
Okay.
Didn't quite end up there, but I'm still in the technology field.
Jennifer?
I'm going to be a doctor.
Okay. Okay. So we don't need to go through, everybody's kind of thing, but I wanted to point something out. When I was talking about what I wanted to be when I was a kid, did you think about what you wanted to be when you were a kid? Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So it's something that goes on in communication where we kind of resonate back and forth with the person that we're talking to. So this morning, I want to talk about how your brain works. Brains are really cool, especially when it comes to language. And this is not TED, by the way. Put that disclaimer, because I think our brains and somebody's pulling our strings. We have a lot of money that's going into the fossil fuel, from the fossil fuel industry, that's going in to kind of push us in a certain direction. And I want to be able to inoculate you against getting your strings pulled. So if there's anybody here that's really good at making hats, and I'm not successful, I want you to make a prototype hat for us to wear. So do I have a volunteer? There we go. Carol's going to make a hat for us. Okay, good. We're also going to talk this morning about values, because I believe we can't have a conversation Made me a little nervous walking by there. I believe we can't have a conversation unless we actually get to our core values. So we're going to do a little breakout exercise on our core values, whether they're, this is sort of liberal and conservative here, it's my interpretation. And I put this visual up and I went through my slide deck last night and I thought, why is that woman shouting at those people? I can't put that up, that's kind of, pejorative, So what I did is I added a caption to it. It says, yes, I understand what mansplaining is. You told me 3 times already. Now, one of the things we do when we have conversations about climate is we do a lot of climate splaining. And I'm going to try and purge us of climate splaining. So that's a new term. You can say you heard it here first. So really what we're trying to do is, in a conversation, listen. But if you've ever been on a one-on-one conversation, sometimes listening is thinking of the thing that you're going to say when the other person shuts up. It's really hard to understand people when you're doing that. And I'm not a very good listener, because that's why I'm up here. I would like to hear from you on your ideas too. So I'm going to introduce the subject of framing, and I'm going to use a guy named George Lakoff. He's a professor at Berkeley. You might have read some of his stuff. But I wanted to start with a question, which is, why are we failing in the environmental movement from convincing other people? I could have said it positively, or why aren't we succeeding better? But I'm making an assumption here, and I'm pushing the argument over to why we're failing. Anybody got any ideas?
Yeah, global warming almost sounds nice. Things are going to get warmer. I much prefer climate crisis.
Okay, we'll talk about that. Yeah. What I started to think about, sure. Yeah. Oh, he's got the hat? Okay, we don't need it yet, only at the end. Okay, thank you. It looks good. I like it. I started looking at what I call leverage points in this whole climate thing, the whole issue of global warming. And it turns out in 1995, 71% of us identified as environmentalists, compared to in 2015, 42%. Wow. I mean, we kind of went like this. The environment now is more polarizing than abortion or gun control. More polarizing. We live our group identities, and we're not living so much on the issues anymore. I believe our messaging from the environmental movement is fractured in the sense that there's over 400 environmental organizations in this country, large ones, and there's probably hundreds more. And we all talk about our issues. Even within the Sierra Club, we talk about our Beyond Coal campaign, we talk about our smart energy, we talk about other things. We don't talk about our values or why those things are important. So we tend to get stuck on the issues. And most of these environmental issues, whether it's save the beavers or save the whales or whatever else, are focused on that issue as opposed to the underlying values that actually motivate people to do certain things. So I also think that the fossil fuel industry is got more money, of course. There are 1,700 lobbyists in Washington, D.C. working for fossil fuels and utilities, and they spend about $37 billion a year. They get they spend about $3 billion and get $37 billion in subsidies and regulation, bypasses, and that sort of thing. So one of the ways that I believe that we can improve on this is making our language resonate more, because we're not doing that right now. So I wanted to start with what is a frame. And we all know what a frame is. That's a frame. When I'm talking about language, is anybody familiar with that concept? Do you understand?
Well, I read
would you-
Lakoff, so,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
She's read Lakoff, all right. This is my interpretation. So a frame is a short story, or an expression, or a metaphor that we're familiar with, that shapes an argument into being one-sided. And the classic example I got is, and this isn't an environmental example, but who here likes to pay taxes? Okay, we got a couple. Who doesn't like to pay taxes? Okay, we got a couple on the other side. That's good. What happens when taxes are too high?
Then I no longer like to pay taxes.
Then you no longer has to pay the tax. What happens to the economy if the taxes go way up?
Spending.
You don't have, spending goes down, so you don't have enough money to spend to do things. What happens if taxes are too low? Yeah, we don't have money for services, whether it's education or security. So reasonable people, and this is a group of reasonable people, ought to assume that there's some optimum level of taxes. And what we argue about is whether taxes are too high or too low. But if I frame this and I say tax relief, well, who's for tax relief? If I had opened the question by saying, who's for tax relief? Well, yeah, a lot of people,
It's a
yeah.
conditional question, though.
Right.
Right, I know. And I will say this many times,
For whom?
progressives, environmentalists tend to be fact-based and reason-based. And so you don't get to ask another one. We need to take a complex idea like taxes and make it simple enough so that people can absorb it. Here's another one. Love it or leave it. That works for marriages, it works for any argument. You don't like America, get out of America. Well, it's absurd, but it's kind of a frame that says, wait a minute, this is the most important thing. Whatever you're interested in doesn't work. So why? The other one that I think of is, from a classic standpoint, the new one that I think we've all bought into is jobs. Just jobs. There's nothing that goes with it. Just jobs. Jobs is the new crack cocaine. You want to win any campaign, you want to, get your fleet, just talk about jobs. It covers everything. So our brains are wired for stories, and Lakoff says 98% of our thought is unconscious. Wait a minute. Well, maybe after last night, 98% of our thought is unconscious. But we don't get up and think about how to screw on the cap of the toothpaste tube or unscrew it. Does it go left or right? We don't think about that. We are inundated by thousands of messages every day. And we need a shorthand way to filter through that. And so if we have frames, that does one more thing. Frames also, to be effective, have to resonate with our values underneath. So if I'm uncertain about taxes, and I have a value that says independence is my value and I don't need the government, then that frame will resonate underneath with my value of independence because it keeps me independent of the government. In terms of environmental examples, the one I hear lately is burdensome regulations. Trump's got his 2-for-1 deal, which personally I think is unconstitutional, but he's got a 2-for-1 deal. But what does burdensome regulations mean? We all know what regulations are.
Regulations you don't like.
You don't like, right. Our tax code is 4,000 pages. We need to simplify it. Well, because it's 4,000 pages, maybe that's fine. Maybe it should be 12,000 pages. I don't really know. But what we're doing is framing it and moving it over. The one I love from the Bush administration is clear skies and healthy forests. Anybody remember that one? Can you imagine what clear skies and healthy forests are? Healthy forests was a program to go in and, in some cases, clear-cut forest areas. it's a little Orwellian in its sense of what we get out of it. It also extends to labels, and one of my favorites since moving down here to Georgia and working in a smart energy committee is ratepayers. Anna, you are a ratepayer. What does that mean? It means I set the rates and you pay them. I'm Georgia Power. Does that mean I have 15 minutes left in the whole presentation? Oh, really? Okay. I thought this
It's
went-
30 minutes?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I screwed up. I got it wrong.
Okay.
It goes to noon.
1 hour.
Okay, thank you. 1 hour. Thank you. I screwed up. Wide awake. That was 30 minutes long.
You're just a bunch of tree huggers. The environment is your religion. We use this in a derogatory sense. In a positive sense, on the other side, instead of being a pipeline protester, you can be a water protector. So there are positive examples of this. So why does it work? We covered that. So you are already responding to a lot of frames because you're not wearing your aluminum foil hats of the fossil fuel industry. And I'll just put up a couple of these here. We've moved from global warming to climate change. That was an actual conservative construct from Dr. Frank Luntz, who advised the Republican congressional committees. Why not? Why is that different? Well, it's less onerous than global warming. Global warming, you might like, or who said they like the fact that it was getting warmer. But
Well, I don't like it, but I
Climate change.
I think climate crisis.
Climate change,
I
right,
think
or
climate
climate
change is
crisis.
innocuous with
Right.
climate crisis.
Crisis is better. I mean, we can work on that. I don't need to do it. But we used to drill for oil. Now we're exploring for energy. We are explorers. Explorers has a positive connotation. It takes drilling for oil out of it. We used to want to be energy independent, but now Trump wants us to be energy dominant. Who doesn't want to be dominant? What does dominant mean? Well, if you're not for dominance, that means you're weak. And we'll get into why that is from the values.
Clean energy dominant.
Yes, well, we'll talk about bending frames in a second. Employer, jobs provider, conservationist, a tree hugger. I just heard this one. Who is the Trump appointee that says carbon dioxide is life? Carbon dioxide is life. It helps plants grow. And, just park yourself in a car and fill it with carbon dioxide. Does this make sense? So we see a lot of that, but it's all transparent to us, and we see it every day. And so one of the things I like is for when you hear something or hear somebody say it, just get that little, wait a minute, didn't feel quite right. Because you will get these back in conversations with other people. I'm not going to teach you how to frame and use framing as the sword to fight, this whole argument. That's not the purpose of this. I just want to make sure you're aware of that. Okay. And we're stuck.
Here we go.
Okay. All right, we're there. So, what I'd like to do is take 2 minutes, turn to somebody that you didn't come with, and come up with, for 3 minutes, a couple of frames, 2 or 3 frames that you might have heard out there. And then there'll be a prize for the best one here, and we'll write them down. So have a quick conversation and think about it. I'm giving you some examples.
Yeah, what do you do?
One per group, maybe? Okay, you got yours. All right, we're gonna try this
see this
then.
now.
And there'll be a prize, so I'm gonna start here. Who wants to go first here? Okay, Raquel.
All of ours are kind of plays on other phrases that they've already had.
Okay.
So, make America green again.
Good. Okay.
There is no planet B.
Okay.
Water is life.
You would tell me. Okay, others?
Cow farts are bad.
I wanted to see it over here. What?
Cow farts are bad.
Cow farts are bad. Okay. Cow farts are bad. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
Well, we're on the other side,
Okay.
sort of like the burdensome regulations.
Right,
government-
that's kind of what I was going for.
Government overreach.
Ah, right, good one, good one.
Look, you said good one twice.
Okay. We'll take a couple more.
Make the air dirtier.
What?
Make the air dirtier.
Make the air dirtier, okay.
Yeah.
Dirtier, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, what else? Yes.
But acid rain is one that sounds ominous, and then the greenhouse effect, which is supposed to be explaining that too, doesn't sound that bad, even though
Yes.
it means it means something wrong, but it doesn't sound as bad as it.
Okay. One more.
Green Planet over profits.
Planet over profits, okay. And I saw one more.
Green energy equals jobs.
Okay.
People, planet, profits.
We're the outliers.
People, then planet, then no, planet, then people, then profits.
All right.
Got back.
Yeah, so you kind of get it. I see some proactive and some kind of, like what I've got up there right now. My two favorites, I think the original sin of climate framing is the two words, climate debate. Because we all know that when there's a debate, there's equal sides. So we just moved from 97% of scientists back to, well, it must be half. And well, if there's a climate debate, then it's not a closed issue, when it is a closed issue. So when we want to talk about climate debate, we should kind of watch that term. Somebody says, well, about the climate debate, I said, there's no debate, that's been settled years ago. That's over with. I don't even go into it.
How long do you want to debate your cancer diagnosis? Is where I go with that.
There's a great one. That's a perfect example, yeah.
But if 50% of the population doesn't believe the facts,
Yeah, we're in
a discussion about why
right.
it is a fact
Right.
can be considered a debate. I mean, it's a
Yes.
did not.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of facts when they're used at the right time. But if I start spewing facts and you and I are not on the same wavelength or are not sharing a value, facts do this to us, they pull us apart. And so we'll talk about that in just a second. So that was my first one. My second one I want to try because I've never tried this with anybody. What about the term climate denier? Is that a frame?
Yes.
Why is it
Pejorative one.
It could be a pejorative one.
Yep.
But here's what I've been thinking about climate denier. One of our values in this country is independence and fairness. You get to believe what you want to believe, you get to believe what you want to believe. And denial is a belief. So when you attack denial, you're attacking somebody's beliefs. As opposed to you're an American, you get to hold your own beliefs. Now, I want to okay.
The right has run from that lately in favor of climate skeptic.
I'm skeptic. Okay.
And climate skepticism, at least
Right.
held by those who are taking that side, is a rational engagement with the facts to come to a public debate on the subject.
Okay.
Which takes they're not denying anything.
Okay.
They're totally open. They're reasonable. It works beautifully as a frame. I think it was genius of them to
Yeah.
move in that direction.
I'm gonna reframe it for you.
Well,
Okay,
might I
just
add-
hold it just a second, and I just want to try one thing. We know that the Koch brothers are putting lots of money into think tanks to position fossil fuels. We know there are people that know why global warming is happening, but won't actually admit it. So if I know something and I don't admit it, and I'm saying it, and I'm trying to get you to believe it, am I deceiving you?
Mhm.
So would I be a climate deceiver then?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, when I'm a deceiver, I'm working against the fairness kind of thing, because Americans will take a lot of crap. They'll give people a second chance, they'll give them a third chance, but they don't like to be conned. Now, I'm not advocating that right now, but I'm just saying, when we think about these terms, in terms of how we use language, deception instead of skepticism. Now, you can be misinformed, and I would argue we don't want to have conversations in depth with people that are so entrenched in denialism or skepticism or deception, because we're not going to move them at all. But Ed,
Well, since a lot of our final arbitration rests on courts, and courts rely on evidence, would anti-evidentialists not be a better, or conjugate that
doesn't
properly?
roll off the tongue.
Well, but something that pointed at you're going contrary to the evidence rather than.
You can kind of get into this and kind of go, oh, this is kind of fun, yeah, maybe how could we do this? Again, I'm not asking people to do this at all. I just want you to be aware in the conversation what's happening. So I want to do a quick down the list. Did anybody get motivated by any of these here? Which ones? I'll tell you what. If you like it, raise your hand, okay? Make America green again. Okay? Okay? No planet B for that, okay? Water is life.
Yes.
Okay. Health farms are bad. That's a that team is voting for. Okay. Government overreach. Okay.
Make
Make
it dirty.
air dirty. I didn't quite understand it. Well, he came up with it, so he likes that. Sorry. Acid rain. I thought it was the name of a rock group from the 60s. Greenhouse effect. Okay. Planet over profits. Okay, we like that. Okay. I think we kind of got Make America Green Again maybe it was the first one. So who came up with Make America Green Again? Oh, you two. Okay, I got this. We have to have 2 prizes. So I gotta have 2 prizes. I gotta find a second prize.
3.
Oh, 3?
It's 3 hours.
I'm in that.
Oh, 3 of you. Okay, well you guys can figure
Now
it
just
out.
stealing your candy.
I have treats here, but here's the deal. I got this all kind of. I'm going to give you this rock here. It's the prize. And I'll tell you a little bit about that rock. Here's where that rock came from. It's from the shores of Lake Superior. And I gave a rock to a young woman at Standing Rock who is standing in the way of 300 military police marching down, and she was a little bit beside herself. And this is what I told her. I said that the sun moves the air moves the water moves the rocks and polishes the rocks, and so there's a lot of energy in that rock. So when you take that rock, you know that you have a lot of power. So what I'm trying to do is connect language back to, whatever we're doing. And for me, one of my values is nature. And so we'll talk about that. I want to just mention something real quick. Positive and negative frames. You can't always have negative frames and have people react to them. So if I say, Chris, I know Chris, she has a heart like a river. It just keeps giving. What do we think of Chris? Do we know who she is? Does it make her feel good? Does it make us feel good? Right. And that's a positive frame, and I'm sure you do have a heart like a river.
She does.
And so there are other positive frames, water protector rather than pipeline protester. The term Mother Earth or Earth rather than environment. Environment is a terrible term. I don't know what environment is. We use it all the time. But I refer to the earth. I'm an earth walker. Okay? I'm walking the earth. consenting customer rather than ratepayer. I can't remember which yours were. And water is life, and Tony. They're all positives, and I think we could use positives. Water is life is an example. Green energy equals jobs. So the problem with framing is this. See, I don't know anybody well enough. But if I said Conrad, when did you get out of jail, Conrad? You don't answer me. Truthfully.
Shortly after your heroin conviction.
Do we have another volunteer? How long have you been out of jail? Does your wife know you've been out of jail? No, he's not responding. But typically, somebody would be going, well, I haven't been in jail. But we know jail is a metaphor. We all know about people in jail. Well, I was in jail in Morton County in North Dakota. And you know what? People in jail aren't any different than us. It's really amazing. But we have this connotation. So what I was trying to show is, what happens when you fight that frame. So I'm going to try something different. I'm going to go on this side of the room. So I want you, I'm going to be your Uncle Ralph, and we're going to be celebrating that holiday of family dysfunction, Thanksgiving. And I'm going to start it out, but I want you to read one of those to me. So I'm going to start it out and then pass it after you read it. So, global warming isn't real. I heard on Fox News it's a hoax.
Uncle Ralph, how can you not believe in global warming?
There's no proof. It's just the weather.
Uncle Ralph, climate change is real. Everyone knows that.
Prove it. I don't see it. Researchers get paid to say it's true.
Uncle Ralph, that's ridiculous. Scientists say they are certain climate change is happening.
Climate is always changing.
Uncle Ralph, don't you care about what happens to your children? The climate is changing faster than it has in 750,000 years.
Even if it is, God would never allow anything bad to happen to us. He loves our children.
Uncle Ralph, you're an idiot.
I just don't understand that if it were really that important, why scientists don't try harder to convince us. Well, what happens is, the big deal, you guys know this anyway, is that the more you fight a frame, it's like Chinese handcuffs. And so, it can be, the only way, there's two ways to deal with a frame, and they're not very easy to do. I just want you to be aware of it. First one is dependent or co-op it. So I once had a competitor say, your company is nickel and diming its customers to death. And I told the sales force, go out and tell everybody, own it. We're nickel and diming you, you're going to save thousands and thousands of dollars. And they dropped it immediately. You can go from tree hugger to tree hugger. Own it. The other way to do it is to ignore it. Again, because the more you fight it, the more entrenched it gets. And the biggest one we're doing is when Trump became president, we went right back 10 years ago and we're arguing climate debate again. I can prove to you that climate change is real. It's a waste of time. It's that giant sucking sound that takes all of our energy. And part of that energy is based on our anger and frustration. But go home and scream into your pillows, take a breath, do whatever you have to do. But I think if we let that go, we'll be further along in actually having conversations and helping other people. So I want to talk a little bit about facts and truths. We said we're not going to trick people by using this. We could use positive frames here. But facts do matter. And but facts don't matter until we get our values on the table and we've had some sort of resolution. I read where about 50% of Americans don't know the fact that 97% of scientists say that global warming is real. That's incredible. 50% of Americans don't know that. But if I open the conversation and go, I'm right, you're an idiot, climate said, and I'm going to prove it to you, 97% of scientists say it's real, you're not going to accept that. You're going to back off of it. You're going to think, well, where did that come from? Wait a minute, I heard a scientist say this as an example. The other one is absolutely the truth is important. I'm very concerned about the language we use and the language we accept. There's a guy, Tim Snyder, and he has a quote that I like, that I realized at the climate march in D.C., the science march. I loved the science of the science march. They were really smart. I mean, they had, first they came for the protozoa, was one of the signs I saw. Girls just want to have funding. Science gives me a hadron. Things like that. And they were all over the map. But somebody from the Sierra Club asked me about their statement on the Science March. And I said, well, I'm going to try and simplify it. I'll simplify it down into 3 or 4 words, but I'll start like this from a Tim Snyder. Science gives us an objective way to get at the truth. And without truth, we have no trust. Without trust, we have no rule of law. Without rule of law, we have no democracy. So the attack on science is an attack on democracy. Well, drop the mic. We don't need to have all the rest of this. We do need to have consistent messages. But the same thing goes for the environment. The attack on the environment is really an attack on our democracy. Now I'm changing and framing that discussion into something else other than CO2 or parts per million or whatever else. So these are important. So what do you do when you have a conversation? Well, the first thing is find a common value. I'm going to say ask a question and then tell your story. And we're going to talk about values in a second. Asking a question gives you, when Uncle Ralph says, hey, global warming isn't real, the first question you might ask is, okay, I know where I'm going on this. Tell me, why is that? Where did you hear it? Whatever. If I do that, 2 things happen. One, I can take a breath. And in the listening thing, I can at least think, am I the right messenger? Do I really want to have this conversation? Do I have, am I willing to engage some of those things before you actually do it? So it also gives you a little bit of that thing. The other one is to explore your story, to try and find a common value. And so we're going to get into some touchy-feely stuff here with values. I told part of my story when I came in here, and it should, yeah.
Could you give me an example of asking a question?
Well, it depends on the statement, but I could say, I had a conservative business colleague say, well, the climate's actually been cooling the last 10 years. Okay? And my reaction was, oh, really? Where'd you get that information? Why is that? And he said, well, I don't know where it was, but so then we did this. I said, okay, you look at temperature charts and they go like this. Okay? You might be able to draw a line like that, but can you draw a line like that? It was, now we were into facts, and he was a I don't know, smart guy, but that's an example. Just pause and take a break there. So Legoff says all politics are moral, and all morals are based on values. And so I want to ask a checking question. Do we have any, you don't have to answer if you don't want. How How many people here would consider themselves independents?
Consider themselves.
Independents. Okay, a couple independents. How many would consider yourselves on the left, either progressive or Democrat? Okay, how many would consider you're conservative or, you know, slightly conservative? Okay.
In general.
In general, right. Because when you get into talking about people's values, it does get to be a sensitive subject. So, what I want to ask first is, what do you think, we talked a little about this yesterday, name some conservative values that you know.
Family.
Family, good one, okay.
Faith.
I'm sorry?
Faith.
Faith? Okay.
Loyalty.
Loyalty. Yeah.
Independence.
Independence.
Accountable. Finances.
Accountable. Okay.
Accountability.
I'm sorry?
I'm saying accountability is probably a little bit.
Accountability.
Security.
Security. Okay,
Responsible.
that's good. These are. But interesting, how many progressives or people identified as left think family is one of your values? Yeah, okay. How many think faith is one of your values? Yeah. I mean, how many value your independence? By the way, independence and the freedom
What is
frame.
that? I can't read it.
Oh, sorry. It's independence.
Oh,
I don't know, it's kind
no,
of, there, it's independence.
yeah. You mean personal independence or because there's community too?
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
That's a question.
It could be personal, and one of my favorite,
Independence is one thing, but,
no, I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't hear.
well, I was just going to say, but not where it interferes with consideration of the community.
That I might suggest is a progressive or a left or progressive value. I want to talk about this though for a second, which is there's something called a moral hierarchy, and I think it'll explain how the conservative mind works. And this is not my stuff; it's Lakoff's stuff. And a hierarchy is, you know what it is. It's one thing above another. Maslow's hierarchy is you need air first, then you need water, then you need food, then you need love and group connection. But God above man, man above nature, strength above weakness, rich above poor, whites above non-whites, men above women, straights above gays. It goes in a hierarchical thing. And this explains a lot about why you hear some of the things that you do from the right. Now, with this, I will also say, comes a sense of responsibility. Okay? If I'm man above woman, but family is one of my values, then I have an obligation to my family. I must take care of my family. Okay? But if you start thinking about the environment, man above nature, we had Karina talking yesterday about Catherine Cato and the relationship with God and evangelists. I don't know if you were in that. But man above nature explains a lot of why, they don't care. The earth is here for us. We've been given dominion over the earth. And so the other side of this then is, what are the values of the progressive movement, and what are your values? And we talk about this. I want to do another quick break for about 2 minutes. Think of one personal value you have, and then think of one value of the progressive or the environmental movement. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. When you have a room of Democrats and Republicans, and they kind of go through this and they put their values up, there's a huge overlap. So we tend to think of them over there and us over here, but there is an overlap. We need to remember that overlap.
But they have a different manifestation of what that value looks like.
Right.
So That's
Um,
where, yeah, we don't believe in personal responsibility, but what that looks like in my world compared to your world.
Right, and so we'll get into that, kind of how we arrive at that.
The rankings are also different.
Yeah, and what you put up first and second is different. Did I say that Republicans are afraid of Democrats? Yeah, it's like 54% of Republicans are afraid of Democrats. 52% of Democrats are afraid of Republicans. It's bizarre. And
I have auto repair shops, so I get rated on a lot of different sites, and someone somewhere, and I never even saw the comment, had made the statement, you can take it to the smug liberals at Mazda only. I had a half a dozen people just show up and said, I had to come see you because they referred to you as smug liberals. So,
that's a phrase.
Yeah.
That's a phrase, and it sometimes is an accurate one. Because we're going to tell people what to do as opposed to kind of see where they're coming from first.
What did you mean by afraid?
Of what?
What did you mean by afraid?
Afraid. Oh, that was the question. It was in a survey. Are you afraid of Democrats? Are you afraid of Republicans? You know, when we're in a, if here's the premise underneath this. If we don't have conversations and we're afraid of somebody else, we'll never come to any sort of persuasion or common thing. And if we need everybody to solve this, we do need our conservative friends and citizens. So I want to talk a second about progressive values. Caring about our fellow citizens. We believe we have both a responsibility to ourselves, personal responsibility, which is up here someplace, but we also have a responsibility to others to make society better. And we believe collectively we can use government to provide resources so that everybody has an equal opportunity and that all can thrive so that society might get better overall. Does that make sense? All right. I know I'm getting a frown here, but
No, I just looked at the heading again. Okay, yeah. That's
Same thing.
progressive, I was gonna say.
So from an environmental, our air, water, and land are all requirements for life. Okay? If we care about others and we care about life, then we must take care of our air and water and land and our fellow creatures so that we can all thrive and survive. And therefore we can't pollute, the commons. We don't own the earth. We're part of the earth. So this kind of gives you, some sense of this. I didn't know whether it would come out of that. So is it possible to hold two of these values at the same time? Can we hold conservative values like responsibility, where are they here? Family, can we hold those with stewardship?
the problem comes in when there is we currently face a very well-funded communication system that has been apparently designed and very well executed to infer that those of us who believe those environmentally positive values really seek to turn the world into a communist domination and take away everything that you have by generating fear. How do we counter the fear?
All that money.
Those bastards. That's a good one. We'll talk about fear in just a second. I think it is. I think you can be some of these things: pro-strength, pro-nature, pro-America. Is anybody here not patriotic? Anybody hate America? Anybody want to love it or leave it? All right, love it or leave it. You got it. You can be Christian and pro-earth. So you can hold these things together. So why is that important? Well, some of you are familiar with the Yale, George Mason kind of spectrum of people. There's a lot of ways to segment people you're talking to. It could be old and young, could be male versus female, could be professional, education level. This is just one way to do this. And they this is from like 2016, I think. 13, sorry, is it on there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you might be familiar with it. So what I'm saying over here is for the people that are deceivers, not just myself, I'm not calling them deceivers, but the people that are deceivers over there, you're probably not going to find common values with them anyway. And it's a waste of time. This is my opinion. It might feel good. I use discussions with these people to figure out where I'm going to have conversations with these people.
You define the people on the right end of the spectrum as con artists so that you can move these other
Well,
people
there's
along.
that too. You might want to form a schism there. But I think we can have conversations and move people in the middle to taking action. I mean, my statement is, if we can take a horse, a cowboy, and the theme from the Magnificent Seven, and gets tens of millions of people to smoke Marlboros, we can sure as heck do a better job of getting them to take action on the environment, can't we? I mean, it's not that big a deal, but we need to move these people this way a little. Not much, but just a little. And I think we'll be much more successful in that conversation. When I have a conversation with somebody out here, or even there, I tend to want to ask these kinds of questions of myself. Can I listen? Who am I listening to? Am I the right messenger? I got a little story. I was trapped in a laundromat in a little town in Arizona last spring, and I was out walking about. The guy came in with a Make America Great hat again. I'm sitting there, there's 2 washing machines, and I just started my load. And I don't know what I'm going to do, on the Wi-Fi. And he was wearing bib overalls and a hat, that hat. And I said, hi, how are you? And helped them kind of figure out how to put the quarters in the laundry machine. Where are you from? Southern Illinois. Whereabouts? So right on the Kentucky border. Okay. And I said something, where are you from? Minnesota. And so I asked him a question. He said, well, I don't know if I want to have a conversation about politics. I'll talk to you. I was wearing my Standing Rock t-shirt. I said, I'll talk to you. And I said to him, well, you don't want to talk politics. Are you American? He goes, yeah, I'm American. I said, well, I'm American. Trying to find some common value. If we're 2 Americans and we can't talk politics, who can talk politics? Okay. We had this wonderful conversation that ranged all the way from GMO crops to wind turbines to machine gun rallies to other stuff. And at the end of this conversation, I kind of figured that one of his core values, and I don't know if I saw it up here, was independence.
Yeah.
Margaret said it was independence. Because he didn't like buying a seed corn from just one company, the GMO crop stuff. It was expensive. You had to go back to him every year. And I knew I wasn't going to move this guy up the scale at all. But I thought I'd at least make him not afraid of a bleeding heart liberal from the 60s. When we were parting, he said something. I asked him, how do you feel about the Trump regime? Or I said, how do you feel about Trump? And he said, well, he's better than the last regime. Now, here's a farmer using the term regime. I said, that's kind of an interesting term, because I listen for words. I said, where'd you hear regime? He said, well, I watch Fox News. I said, oh, okay. It's kind of interesting. Why would you get all your news from one source? He said, mostly, you watch that mostly. When you don't want to have your crops from your seeds from just one vendor. Well, what? Yeah, I suppose you're right. What do you recommend? Well, I don't know, maybe go with CNN or something. I didn't go MSNBC. But, you got to figure out, are you the right messenger? That wasn't the right messenger. Where are they? Figure out where they are. Find out what their common values are. And then figure out your story that relates to those values. And you know this anyway. My value that I tell my story around is around nature. And so And then ask what questions can I ask that will get them thinking, as opposed to what statements can I make. Key point here in the conversation is, how does this make you feel? It's one of the questions I always ask. How does it make me feel? Well, puppy dogs, ice cream cones, little kids.
Yeah.
Makes
I'm not sure my eyes
all right,
are
for you, that's not. But the question I want is, how does it make you feel in the conversation? So why is it we hear so much from our community on things like, take me to the land of mammary secretions and insect vomit? They can't see it, that's milk and honey right there. Didn't come through on the thing. We, our conversation started with scientists. We are so full of parts per million and thermal this and that. And it's just, scientists are not great communicators. They are crappy communicators. And we keep going back and trying to prove, you know, we can show you on this graph. Look at this graph, look at this package, look at this study here. It doesn't make any difference. Our brains and the progressive side, we use facts. Go ahead.
Do you think things like, instead of pointing to graphs, pointing to hurricane activity?
That could be, yeah. I got a friend whose house was damaged by the hurricane, and he says, you know, he's seeing them every year now. You know, whatever it is. My story?
Rush Limbaugh says that's not because of global warming.
Yeah, well, he got his chicken ass all forwarded.
Yeah. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Okay. I tell a story. I mean, you have to find your own value. If your value is independence, or your value is freedom, or whatever else, figure out the story that goes with that. So one of my stories is raspberries. I have a raspberry patch in my backyard in Minnesota. You don't believe in global warming? Well, I can tell you from personal experience, I keep a record of when I pick my last raspberry every year. 20 years ago, it used to be October 15th. Last year, November 15th.
Wow.
So it's pretty hard to challenge somebody's story, and I believe that, you know, we depend on the earth, and I'm a little worried about that. How do you feel about it? Now, I'm engaging from a value of my connection to nature. I didn't engage with the guy from Southern Illinois. By the way, he leased his land, the mineral rights on his land, to a coal company. His wife was a coal miner for a number of years, who now has health problems. I asked him just a point-blank question. This is a sidebar. Well, do you think Trump's going to bring back coal? No. Period. No. You know, he knew the coal was dead. We talked about frames. We're focusing on the issues and not our values. That's a repeat. Go ahead.
I want to ask a question about that, about how it is that certain frames work, even when the person who is being manipulated knows that they are being manipulated. So the bring back coal jobs is a lie that the people being lied to recognize in large numbers as irrational and impossible. It is a game being played by the communicator that it still works to bring people to them because it has some relationship to a value, but it's a con. How do you get?
Mexico's going to build the wall.
How do you get past? I mean, how does that
pay for the wall?
Here it is. This is what I think. I've thought about that particular case. Whether coal jobs come back or not. Let's suppose I'm an auto worker in Detroit or a pipe fitter in North Dakota. If Trump says he's bringing back coal jobs, he's not just speaking to the coal people. It's not just about the fact that coal is old. You know, even coal companies say this isn't going to change anything. What he's saying is, I care about you, Jeff. I care about the small guy, and I'm going to stand up for you. And that's why it does, because it resonates with that value of who I am, and I haven't been listened to.
But that's
So
an
he's
even
listening
bigger
to me.
lie.
What?
That's an even bigger lie.
It is. It
All evidence to the
is. But guess what? You guys, us, are all stuck in the fact that we know coal is not coming back.
I'm stuck in the fact that it's a lie. I am, when I hear somebody who is manipulative,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's manipulating my feelings or manipulating my knowledge, I am aware, I may be aware of the manipulation, and it turns me against that person. It turns me against that person's argument.
Yeah.
The thing that is amazing to me that works on the right,
Right.
is that there is this willingness to be manipulated effectively.
Okay.
And I would love to know how to undermine that.
I don't have a way to do that except for us
Manipulating
tell our
better.
story and be better. And the only other thing is, I know Margaret tells me every day that I'm the best looking guy in the world. So, I mean,
Good
I
job.
know that's not true, but I feel it right here.
Well, Trump makes us, what he's saying is, I'll bring coal back, is I'm gonna bring back the good old days.
Yeah.
Right,
It's
yeah.
it's a security appeal.
Right.
It's
We're
like
gonna-
Lee
it's a-
knows
it's a
he's not the best looking
non-inclusive-
guy.
We're gonna seal the borders.
He wants to
We're
believe
gonna
it.
bring back the jobs. We're gonna listen to the people that haven't been listened to. And he is a con artist. And I think the only way he's vulnerable, well, one of the ways he's vulnerable is by pointing out that he's a con artist, because you don't like to be conned. Oh, you think he's bringing back coal? Oh, wow. Oh, you're not being conned. I mean, I just leave that as the doubt. I got to move on real quick here because I got couple more things if I could. Again, facts and reason. I get this email. I don't expect you to read it. It was about, the first line is about the Endangered Species Act. I get 100 of these a day, and they look like this. And the reason, fact, reason. It works for progressives sometimes, but I would ask, what should we do instead? What if I had that instead? Now, I'm going to put a caveat on that. How do you feel? How does that make you feel? Angry, disgusted, sad. You're putting emotions into it, but an image is worth at least 450 words. So when you're telling a story, you're painting an image. Okay? Now, I don't like that image because I get disgusted and I get angry and a lot of this, we live in this attention-based economy. And the attention-based economy is based on fear. Okay? And the problem is fear and disgust don't work at convincing people of your cause. You're going to die. Maybe works in some churches, sorry, with apologies, but you're going to die from global warming or I don't know if I've got one a little later here. Fear and disgust doesn't work, or doesn't work very well. It works for capturing your attention, but we don't want to just capture attention. We want to actually move people on the scale. So the more we tell them the world is coming to an end, the worse our arguments are. So I want everybody to raise their hand and say, I promise not to scare people. I promise not to scare people. Until I've got at least some value out on the table where I can have that conversation, use the facts that I want. How does that make you feel? So if I use that image instead of the previous image, would I have gotten a better response? I might have even gotten a better response if I had said, and we've saved 5,000 wolves in the process of whatever I'm doing. And can you give more money so I can save another 5,000? I believe we should move from this kind of messaging over to this kind of messaging. We need to be more hopeful, more action-oriented, less issues-based. If we do that as a movement, we'll be further along. But again, fear makes people feel helpless. This is from a group in Minnesota, especially during hurricanes, was like, okay, what subliminal message am I sending? We talk a lot about, somebody said, save our children. do it for our next generation or something like that. There's some studies that indicate that that works for progressives, but that it doesn't work for conservatives. Conservatives are more temporal focused in the past, so what we're doing for future generations isn't as important as what we're doing right now. So a better way to have that conversation is to say, I want to restore the purity of the earth.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Does it work to look backwards for them? Say, people looked out for you, pay it forward?
Don't know. Try it.
They don't like the term "pay it forward."
Yeah.
Do you think that's bad? I see that as a kind of a religious.
Because, yeah, that's.
So, but put it in a religious context then.
I'm gonna skip through because we got a couple minutes left, and I'm gonna finish my story here, and then I'll give you a quick summary here. So give me just a second. And what's gonna happen here? Can you see that? Good. Okay, now you can't see the whole thing. Okay, now if the sound system works, I'm going to tell you the other half of my story here. So I invite my grandkids up one-on-one to Minnesota to spend a week outside. And this is Teo. You're not supposed to have favorites. Marty tells me. I have favorites. He's my favorite. And his mom didn't want him to become a Cub Scout because of some scouting stuff, and he had a gay thing with Scouts. And so I said, well, Teo, if you come to Minnesota, you can become a young Earth Walker. And he goes, well, what's a young Earth Walker? And I said, well, we'll do 15 things outside. You know, and he goes, well, like what? We'll learn to use a knife and start a fire, and we'll pee in the woods. Inside, we'll do 15 things. We'll learn to write a poem, tell a story. We'll learn to be quiet for an hour. Okay, and he's 6, and he flew up on the airplane by himself. He got off the plane. He goes, now, how about this Earth Walker thing? You made this up. This isn't real. I go, well, okay, it is real, Teo. It could take you years to become an Earth Walker. And I wanted to bring him to the jungle that I grew up in, but the lake's full of milfoil, the swamp's been filled in, the forests have been cut down. We found another place to go. But he was still a little skeptical, and he said, you know, I don't know, this Earth Walker thing. I said, well, when you're ready, you can take the pledge. Well, you never say that to a 6-year-old. He said, well, I'm ready now. And I go, oh, what the heck have I done? Think quick. I said, okay, so raise your right hand, Teo, and repeat after me. Okay, as I walk the earth, I promise, and then he stumbles over the next 3 words. Preserve, defend, and conserve. We got those right. Our air, water, and land, and all the creatures that live there, because we're all connected. Because we're all connected.
That's really good for him.
And he said, he was quiet. And he said, are you okay? He goes, yeah. He says, what are we going to do about that? And I had one of my WTF moments. Like, I don't think I can buy absolutions from this year, but I've got to do something. And so I thought about it for a couple months, and I came home and I talked to Margaret. I said, I was in a friend of mine, I started healthcare startup. Said, that's going really well. We started with 3 people. We got 40 people now. You know, we're on our way. I think I'm going to quit that, and I'm going to work on the environment. She said, was it going to cost us any money? I said, I don't know. It doesn't matter. And so I've given myself a year to figure out what that is. So I had Ian and Teo. Ian is one of my other grandsons.
This is the Earthwalker pledge. Please raise your hand.
So I want everybody to raise their hand.
As I walk the earth, I promise to preserve, conserve, and defend our air, land, and water, and all the creatures that live on it. Because we are all connected. Thank you. Please let us know how you can help.
You're now all young Earthwalkers. And the reason I put that up was because it's kind of cute and I'm a proud grandpa. But I put that up on Facebook, and it's got like 66,000 views. Wow. And 3,000 shares and 600 likes and that sort of thing. It's kind of got a little life of its own. But the point behind that is more that resonates with a family value or the protection of children, which is one of my values. So if I go to my value, I'm not preaching about the environment, but I believe that can actually move people who might be in the middle a little bit over, and that's what we want to do. So the thanks for pledging. I'll add you to the list. Let's see here, sorry.
Just need
One more.
flag in the background.
Well, yeah. So then, what's the summary? I got 1 minute, maybe.
Yeah.
Summary is this: just be aware of how the climate is framed, so that you're not manipulated. Your strings don't get pulled. Please stop fighting the climate debate. Assume that we're moving to clean energy. Have that conversation as opposed to having the climate conversation. Because guess what? Clean energy is a lot. I go out to do door knocking, kind of as an experiment in Minnesota, and I get 85% thumbs up in clean energy. How come we can't do more on clean energy? I don't even have to talk about that. Engage, please engage. Don't be afraid. Engage and have conversation. Find those common values. We're all Americans. We all have similar values. Figure out your story and what makes you tick from here and share that. And remember the question, how's it making somebody else feel? So thank you.